Hello everybody, Unholy Vision here from Venomous Pictures, and today I bring you a how to build a computer guide. I know there's a lot of these on the internet, but I figured I'd have one from my own perspective since I have a new build with a 2080 Ti, a Core i7 7820X, 64 gigs of RAM, a Rosewill water cooling block. I went with that just to fit the color of the build and everything. Custom cables, a ROG STRIX X299 gaming board for the build, and a EVGA SuperNOVA power supply. I got a little crazy with the power supply because I plan on doing something with two cards in it, not another RTX, but probably flip-flop an actual second card in there to do some pass-through maybe. And we have a Phanteks case here with a nice little window. All this stuff will be in the description box below. This guide is, of course, not required to have all this. The computer parts are basically like Legos, and they all somewhat fall together in the same way. So you will not have to do that. You will not have to have this, but you can use this sort of as a guide. For the drives, I'm using a WD Blue 500 gigabyte SSD and a C8 8 terabyte hard drive. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is get our thermal compound and our CPU. We need to, first of all, open the socket up here. Depending on what your board is, you may have one or two pins here, little levers. You just have to kind of squeeze it and get them to come out. And there goes one of my bolts. Open that thing up. I don't know how well you can see that in the camera, but there's a little arrow right here, and we try to line that up with the arrow on the board. Notch it in, and when it's nice and in there, it'll just drop in. You don't have to push it or anything. Then you just lay the door back down. Get your latches ready. Push. Lock one in and lock the other one in. And there you go. Just pull that right off. Sometimes they'll pop, sometimes they won't. But you want to keep this thing because, you know, if you have to return it for an RMA or something like that, you can have that ready. So now we need to install the RAM. This board has it, so if you had the actual floor core chips, you can only use this side of the board for RAM. You can't put anything in that. We're not doing that with this video, so we install our RAM. What we need to do is every one of these pins up at the top. Sometimes, depending on the board, it might slide down the little clips on both sides, but usually more modern boards now are doing this one pin system. You just slide it in there, and you don't really apply any force, just let it slide in there, and then just a little push, and you should have heard it clip there. To apply some thermal compound, there's a few different ways that people want to do this. They want to do it in a little P shape, a little dot. Honestly, it doesn't really matter too much. You try not to put too much on the actual CPU, but I like to just go little teeny P shape in there. And usually that's relatively a good amount. And over time, it will actually span itself out over the CPU. So with every CPU cooler, it may be a little different. The stock one should just fit right on there out of the box. But if you're using a third party like me, you may have to do something a little different. I have to just screw these right in here. And then you put this sucker on top of it. start from one side, put a little pressure on one side, then you go to the other, the opposite, so you can kind of, you know, max out the pressure on both sides, so you're not lump siding the thing. Alright, so now that we got all our stuff on the motherboard, we need to actually mount this into the case. Depending on what your actual case is and how it has it set up at the beginning, you may need to place standoffs wherever your motherboard's holes are. But it seems like this case right here already has basically every hole in there filled, and there are no extra standoffs in the actual baggie that is included. So let's get this. We got to get our I/O shield. We need to put our I/O shield in there. We want to face the holes and everything based on the motherboard's ports. So usually the like line in and stuff like that will be at the bottom. And then we just want to sort of push on this until it pops into place. So once you have that nice and snug in there, you grab your motherboard, you place it in there, and you line it up with the holes there, and just sort of slide the sucker in there. And now you begin mounting your motherboard with each hole. Alright, so the next step, since I use the pump, I'm using different cords and everything. These pins need to go for the fan into the actual motherboard. If you can see that right in there, it says the CPU fan. Alright, so we need to get the power supply in there. We need to point our side so where we plug our cables in this way. Keep the fan towards the bottom if you have a air cut out for it, you know, a vent and everything, and just sort of line it up and then screw in the screws. Okay, so the back of your power supply should have all these little ports, and they should say something along the lines like CPU, motherboard, MB, VGA. You'll have to look at each one of the things to know where you're supposed to plug stuff, but it's pretty straightforward. Alright, since we have the actual power cables plugged in now, so we need to plug in our actual power for the motherboard, the 24 pins and 12 pins and 4 pins or whatever your motherboard takes. Just get them all into the right spots. They're pretty hard to miss because they're big empty ports basically. Then once you have that, you need to secure like the USB stuff for your front panel and a USB port. Just align the little knob right here in with the port, slide it in. After you've done that, it's time to get all the like other case fans plugged in. We need to get the power LED and hard drive LED, power switch, all the related stuff, HD audio. You'll have to refer to your motherboard's manual to know where everything is. Usually it's pretty much the same, and sometimes you can see it on the motherboard and it's printed on there, but it's not always as clear as that, so you may want to still check your motherboard manual just to see, to be on the safe side. We'll need our SATA cables now, and we'll need to actually plug it into the board. Usually it's something like this on the side. It really depends on the board, but you'll just plug it in one of these ports and go right to the drive. So let's get that plugged in. Now we need to mount our drives. If your case has one of these SSD cages. Just slide it up like that, pull it up. Now that we have it mounted, everything like that, screwed in, we need to align the big holes there back with that so it kind of gets snug, and you just kind of push it into place. So now we need to plug our SATA cable, SATA, whichever one you want to say, into the drive here. And we need our power for SATA that we plugged into our PSU, our power supply, into the drive. Alright, so my case has these little ports right here where you just slide them right out, these little drive trays. What we're going to have to do is mount the hard drive into these. Usually they have these little mounting pins in them, so you don't have to put as many screws in the drive. Now that we have the drive in there, we do the same thing as we did for the SSD. So just plug the power in there, grab your SATA cable. Since this one's kind of angled, I'm going to have to just do that. There are sometimes where you have angled cables and you just have to use them. Make do. Anyway, tuck all that away, sort of down there. We could always, expand and install more drives. At this point, you might want to start working on your cable management a little bit. Tuck anything away the best you can, and sort of just work it out and get it cleaned up. Then once you get it all nice and sort of tucked in for airflow sake, put this back of the case back on, flip it around, and let's get our GPU installed. So now we need to get the GPU in here. We need to plug it into the first actual PCI Express port up here. It does matter in a lot of boards. Some it won't always matter, but honestly it's just the safest bet to put it in here. It's usually the fastest lane, and we just need to unscrew and pop out all the back stuff. For the card, you may have to actually put the card semi in there to align it and look at how it goes in there, because every case is a little different. It may not line up perfectly. Alright, so you just slide it into the port here. You have to wiggle it a little bit there. Line it up into the back. Take the screws or thumb screws or whatever it has in your case. Line it back up with the holes and screw this card back into its actual home. Now that we have it all plugged in there and mounted, we need to get our cords, the 8 pins or 6 pins, whatever your GPU takes, from your PSU, and plug it into the card. You need 2 pins or more, put it accordingly to your actual GPU. Make sure it's kind of snug, and then you're good. Alright, so this is our completed machine. A little bit of the effect of the LEDs. I don't have too many in it. I try to stay away from that as much as possible. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell button real hard so that you crack your monitor. And I'll see you all in the next video. This is Unholy Vision signing out.